My parents got rid of my dog so they could have another kid. This happened about 26 years ago, so I was 7 years old at the time, and we had a chocolate Labrador named Duke. My parents always told me that he was the best dog ever. He was big, strong, super smart, and very gentle, especially with kids, and he loved us so much. We would go on long walks with him in the woods near our house, and he would fetch my frisbee until he could uint anymore, and he just looked so happy doing it. When we went on holidays, he would come with us, and whenever we came back home, he would be so happy to see us, and he would just lick us all over and wag his tail so hard that his whole body was shaking. But most of all, he loved my dad. Whenever my dad came home from work, he would run to the door and wait for him to open it so he could lick him all over, and then they would go for a walk together. And when my dad sat down, Duke would always want to be in his lap or close by. He literally worshipped my dad, and my dad loved him too. I would often see them laying down on the floor, just chilling together. It was so sweet. One day, my parents came home from visiting my grandma and grandpa, and when they were unpacking the car, I saw something strange. They had brought my grandparents' dog, a small white terrier named Lucky, who was my grandparents' dog. My parents said that they would only keep him for a few days, because my grandparents were going on holidays, and they didn't want him to be alone in that big house. So they asked if I would like to play with him while they unpacked stuff. I played with him for a bit, but then he started biting my legs, and I stopped playing with him. Then I went to tell my parents that their dog was biting me, and they just laughed and said, "Oh, he's just excited, don't worry." Then they went back to I wasn't really convinced, but I didn't say anything else. A couple of hours later, I wanted to play outside, and I went to get my bike. That's when I saw my dog Duke in the backyard. He was laying down in the grass and he looked sad. I went up to him and started petting him, but he didn't seem happy to see me. That was weird. I went back inside and told my mom that Duke hit you and greeted me when I came home, and he seemed sad. She just said, "Oh, don't worry, he's probably just not feeling well. You know, sometimes dogs get sick." Then she gave me some water and told me to go play outside. So I went back out, but this time, I took Duke with me. As soon as we were outside, I felt something was wrong. He didn't try to chase the ball or the frisbee. He barely even lifted his head when I threw the ball, and he just kept staring into the distance. I thought maybe he was just tired of playing, so I tried to pet him, but then he snapped at me, and then he took off running. I ran after him, but I couldn't catch him, and he kept running further and further away from me. I was scared, because he had never done that before. I was also scared, because he could easily run out into the busy street, so I started screaming for help. My mom and dad came running, and when they saw Duke, they started screaming too, and then they both started crying. My dad tried to approach him, but Duke started growling and showing his teeth. My dad backed away slowly, and then he collapsed on his knees and started sobbing. He cried and begged Duke to come here. But then my mom put her arms around my dad and told him it was okay. She said Duke was sick, and that's why he was acting like that. Then she looked at me and said, "I'm sorry, sweetheart, but we need to take him to the vet." Then she picked me up and carried me to the car, while my dad stayed behind in the backyard with Duke. On the way to the vet, my mom told me that Duke was sick, and the vet would give him medicine so he would feel better. I was still kind of scared, but I hoped that what my mom said was true. When we arrived at the vet, my dad was already there with Duke. The vet was a friend of ours, so when he saw us, he came out of his office to greet us, and I remember him putting his hand on Duke's fur and then looking at my parents and shaking his head. Then he took them into his office, and I was allowed to stay in the car. A few minutes later, my mom came out of the office and got into the car. She was crying. She didn't say anything. She just hugged me, and then she drove home. When we got home, my parents called me into their bedroom. I remember it was full of stuffed animals and toys, because I had just come back from visiting my grandparents, and they had been storing my stuff there. And when I entered the room, they both told me how much they loved me, and that I was the best kid ever. And I was confused, but I was like, yeah, okay, I guess I am pretty cool. And then my mom continued. She said that they had something very important to tell me, but then they would tell me later because I would have a lot of questions and they didn't want to upset me. And I wasn't happy with that answer, but I knew they wouldn't tell me anyway, so I just dropped it. Then we had dinner together, and afterwards my dad took me to my room and tucked me into bed. And then he told me that Duke was UNC. Instead, he said, "Your mom and I have something very difficult to tell you. We've decided to give Duke away." I was completely shocked and I just couldn't believe what my dad was telling me. I started asking a million questions, but they could only answer one. Yes, we've found a good family for him and he will be loved. Well, that wasn't the answer I wanted. I was so angry. I started yelling at my dad and told him that he was an asshole and that I hated him. I remember he just stood there in the doorway and took it. He didn't try to defend himself. He just let me yell and scream and cry. I don't know how long I screamed for, but then I just laid down and fell asleep. In the morning, I went to my parents and asked them if Duke was still there, but they said he had already been given away that morning. They said they didn't want me to be too attached to him, because they had made up their mind, and that's final. Then they left for work, and I went to school. At school, I told my best friend what had happened. Of course, he thought it was hilarious. And when we came home, I asked again if Duke was still there. But he had been taken to the vet and then given away. I was devastated. I missed him so much. I remember walking through the empty house and crying his name. It hurt so much. Well, the thing is, my parents never gave me a straight answer as to why they did this to me. It was always because he was sick, or he needed more exercise, or he bit me, or he was getting too old, or they could unhandle his energy anymore. And now, almost 30 years later, I still don't know why they took my dog away. All I know is that I miss him terribly.